Please, we should go ahead now.
Should I start, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, sir. Good afternoon, everyone, and I welcome esteemed patron, chief guest, keynote speakers, resource person, moderators, and all the participants to the first 10-day online international research methodology workshop in social sciences. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Great. This workshop is organized by the J&K Economic Association in collaboration with School of Commerce and Management, Lingaya's Vidyapeeth, Faridabad, and Academ's Publishing House, Delhi. So the objective of this workshop is to foster an understanding of basic research methods and their applications in social sciences research. I'm so delighted to be part of this event as a moderator, and I look forward to a fruitful and engaging learning experience for all of us. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to extend a warm welcome to each one of you to today's workshop, where we are privileged to have Dr. Irfan Ahmed Sofi as our esteemed resource person. Dr. Sofi, I welcome you.
Thank you.
Let's a little bit catch up about Dr. Sofi. Dr. Sofi brings with him a wealth of expertise and profound insights in the field of economics, making him an invaluable addition to our discussion. Dr. Sofi currently serves as an assistant professor in the Department of Economics at the Islamic University of Science and Technology, Awantipora, J&K. His academic journey is marked by outstanding achievements, including his PhD in economics from the IIT Indore in 2015 and a postdoctorate from IIT Guwahati. His commitment to academic excellence is further underscored by his qualification in UGC NET Economics in 2012. Throughout his academic career, Dr. Irfan has been the recipient of prestigious fellowship, including the IIT Junior and Senior Research Fellowship at IIT Guwahati and a UGC Fellowship during his MPhil studies at Pondicherry University. His research spans critical areas such as economic growth, development economics, and applied econometrics, reflecting his dedication to advancing economic scholarship. Prior to his current role at Awantipora, Dr. Sofi served as an assistant professor at BGSP University, Rajouri, Jammu and Kashmir, where he made significant contributions to the academic community. Today, we are fortunate to benefit from Dr. Sofi's deep knowledge and experience as he shares his insights. His expertise promises to enrich our understanding and stimulate throughout the thoughtful discussion that are essential for our collective growth and learning. Dr. Sofi, on behalf of everyone present here, I extend heartfelt gratitude to you for graciously accepting our invitation to join us today. Your willingness to share your expertise and engage with us in meaningful dialogue is deeply appreciated. We eagerly anticipate your presentation and look forward to learn from your valuable perspective. Once again, a warm welcome to Dr. Irfan Ahmed Sofi and to all the participants who have joined us today. So let's embark on this workshop with enthusiasm and a shared commitment to advancing knowledge in economics. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Priya, for giving my introduction. And first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this workshop for giving me the opportunity to give a talk at this important platform. So let me first of all share my screen. I have a PPT presentation with me.
Great. So in the meantime, you're sharing the screen. I would like to inform all the participants, as Dr. Firdaus sir has said, that everyone will get an equal chance to ask the questions. So requesting you all, in the meantime, sir is showing his presentation. I request you all to please keep your mics on the mute so that the presentation flow will be very nice. And then at the end of the day, where we will be having the question and answer session, so everyone can ask the questions one by one. Thank you.
So can you see my PPT now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the topic of my talk today is indigenous employment protection legislations and total factor productivity, evidence from plant level panel analysis from Indian manufacturing sector. So basically, this study was funded by Azim Premji University, Bangalore. The study has completed now, and I am now working on a research publication for this. So this was a 2-year research project. It was awarded in 2021 under a competitive call from the Azim Premji University. So as the title suggests, in this study, I am analyzing the impact of labor regulations, specifically focusing on job security laws, which are also called as employment protection legislations. And you can see in the title itself, I put the word here endogenous. So when I say endogenous employment protection legislation, so that means I am suggesting here in this study that that these job security laws or the enforcement of the job security laws is not anything which is exogenously determined in the economy. Rather, it is something which is determined within the system, within the economic environment, right? So I treat the enforcement of the employment protection legislations as endogenous, right? And then addressing this endogeneity problem using some advanced techniques, I am able to provide a robust evidence regarding the impact of these legislations on firms' total factor productivity, right? So let me give you the context. As you know that India has emerged as one of the fastest large economies in the world, but despite this, India is facing serious problem of unemployment. So we all acknowledge that unemployment problem in India is it is a serious problem, right? But over the last decades, if we see the employment generation in different sectors, you can see services sector is one of the sectors which has play a leading role in employment generation over the last couple of decades. Services sector employment has gone from 127.3 million in 2011-12 to 165 million in 2020-23. So similarly, the another sector which has taken lead is the construction sector. It currently employs 71 million people as of 2023, and it had employed 26 million people in 2004 and 5. So that shows rising, from 26 million to 71 million. So this is also a substantial rise in employment generation in this sector also. So these are the sectors which have played an important role, but unfortunately, many economists, they argue that services sector is something where we cannot bank on a services sector for the long run employment requirements. Economists usually believe that services sector is something where it's a high productive sector. People who find jobs in the services sector, they are high productive and they earn good salaries. But services sector is at the same time something which does not have that much absorption capacity as sectors like manufacturing sector usually happens to have, right? Similarly, on the other hand, if you look at the construction sector, our data tells us that 81% of the workers which are engaged in construction sector, they are unskilled. They are unskilled, and hence they are low productive, and therefore their wage earnings tend to be relatively lower, right? So the problem, for us is that we have a huge chunk of educated youth who are unemployed, and there is a huge chunk of semi-skilled population who neither they can go to the services sector, nor they would like to work in construction sector because they have some level of skills, right? So for such type of population, usually it's the manufacturing sector which has important role to play. But unfortunately, if you take a look at this data, manufacturing sector.
Sorry for inconvenience, sir. Your slides are not. Can you make it on slide mode so that
okay?
We are at the post slide.
Okay. So I think so that suggests that there is problem in the speed of the internet maybe. So can you see the second slide?
No, sir, it is add post to the right. You have to make it on slide mode poster. Then
Yeah, it is on the slide mode itself. Just give me a moment.
and now we are.
Now can you see the second slide?
Yes.
Okay. So if you take a look at this data pertaining to manufacturing sector, you can see that as of now, manufacturing sector accounts for only 17%, of 17% in India's GDP, and only 11.5% of the total workforce. And manufacturing sector employed 59.8 million people in 2011 and 12. And it increased only from 59.9 million to 64.8 million people in 2022 and 23, right? So that means there hasn't been some substantial rise in job creation, in employments, right, in manufacturing sector as compared to services sector and construction sector. And this sends alarms for policymakers, because manufacturing sector is something which is supposed to grow faster and absorb a larger chunk of our semi-skilled population, right? So this has triggered debates among academia as well as in policy circles. People and analysts are sector, what hampers it from job creation, right? So many people advance different hypotheses as to what are the underlying causes, and different causes have been put forth. But one of the controversial factor that has been cited in the literature and has been discussed a lot in policy circles is the question of the labor law. So labor law has been, it has been argued that labor law is one of the factors that hampers employment generation in manufacturing sector, and this is responsible for holding back growth in this important sector, right? When it comes to labor laws, of course, in India there are number of labor laws. As of now, there are around 45 central labor laws and more than 200 state labor laws. But the debate on labor laws, the question of the point of labor law holding back manufacturing sector, this debate basically revolves around one most controversial piece of legislation, which is called as employment protection legislation, or employment protection legislations are also known as hiring and firing laws, and you can also call them job security laws. So as I said, there are many types of labor laws in the economy, but hiring and firing laws or job security laws are the ones which have attracted significant criticism from economists and some policymakers as well. So if you look at India's manufacturing sector, there are labor laws which are contained under the Industrial Disputes Act 1947. The Industrial Disputes Act 1947 has two significant chapters which are being discussed. One is called as Chapter 5A and another is called as Chapter 5B. Under Chapter 5, this Chapter 5A is applicable for enterprises with employing greater than 50 workers but less than 100 workers. It has several sections: Section 25B, 25C, 25F, and 25.
But again, we are on the previous slide. You have moved next.
Okay. So is it fine now?
Yes.
Yeah. So it has these sections, Chapter 5A. So it has five important sections which provide for sort of job security for the workers in terms of making it compulsory for employers to seek formal government permission for layoffs and retrenchments, And if employers initiate any layoffs or retrenchments, it is mandatory for firms to pay compensation payments, to workers affected by these layoffs and retrenchments, right? These are the provisions under Chapter 5A, and then we have Chapter 5B of the Industrial Disputes Act, which is more severe. The provisions, the security of the job security under this section, they are more severe as compared to job security provided under Chapter 5A. So the applicability of this Chapter 5B, it applies to relatively large firms employing more than 100 workers. So it has three important sections. Section 25O, which lays down the procedure for closing down an business undertaking, and then Section 25M, which prohibits, which lays down prohibition of layoffs and government and makes government permission mandatory whenever any employer in the manufacturing sector, whether they are operating in the private sector or government sector, they have to seek permission, formal permission from government, and they have to issue 3 months notice. Under this Chapter 5B, they have to issue 3 months notice period before they can terminate any worker. So all these provisions, they constitute significant job security, for workers. And as you have seen, this job security varies as per the size of the enterprise. Lesser size enterprises, they are bearing lesser brunt of this job security laws, and more severity is applicable to enterprises with larger size of the plant, right? So now let me discuss the hypothesis that I'm going to test empirically. So basically, I am arguing that these job security laws. So we can call it as, in simple words, we can call it as employment protection legislation, EPL. So I argue that EPL has both negative and positive channels. It can sprout negative channels as well as positive channels for firm performance. As far as the negative channels are concerned, we have several theoretical models in labor economics which argue that firing cost or any restrictions on firing, on labor firing, layoffs or retrenchments can create misallocation of resources and stifle firms' desired responses to market shocks. Another branch of literature argues that the anticipated firing costs or firing restrictions can force suboptimal labor input, impinging on firm productivity and growth, right? So this is one branch of the literature. At the same time, I also argue that EPL can influence the dynamics of the labor market by also influencing the wage determination. So we have literature, renowned literature, which was pioneered by Lindbeck and Snower, called as insider-outsider models. Those insider-outsider models can be used to draw insights to explain how EPL can influence the dynamics of labor markets and thereby influencing the wage determination in the economy, right? So now let's talk about the positive channels, how EPL can generate positive channels and
Can we, sir, move to next slide?
Yeah. Yes. Which one?
We skip the first one.
Yeah. So this one, eh? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was the part one of my hypothesis development, where I explain how employment protection legislation can develop negative effects. What are the mechanisms by which it can affect negatively for firm performance, right? So I say that it can directly create misallocation of resources by creating rigidity in employment adjustments. And second, it can influence the dynamics of the labor market by influencing the determination of wages. And we can draw insights from insider-outsider models also to explain how dynamics of labor market can be influenced by EPL and how EPL can in turn determine wages in the economy, right? So can you see the second part of the hypothesis now? Is
yes,
it visible
sir,
here? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So now let's talk about the positive channel. So I argue that that apart on the one hand, EPL can generate negative effects, but at the same time, it has the potential to sprout channels that are good for performance. So, for example, a pro-worker employment protection legislation or a pro-worker job security law regime can boost employee commitment and encourage workers and employers to invest in firm-specific skills and human capital, which is an important source of competitive advantage for firms. Similarly, strict rules under employment protection legislation can reduce workers' inclination, because it will give motivation to workers, and thereby reducing workers' inclination to switch between one job to another job, and this will reduce employers' inclination also to dismiss her workers, because when employers know that the workers that are working in my company, and I'm providing them job security, so they are going to be here for the longer time period. So this will reduce the reason. There will be no reason for employers to dismiss them after that, right? So thereby it will help firms to improve the retention rates of these workers, and this will lead to stability in the workforce. And we know economic theory tells us that if we have stable workforce in a company, that will enhance productivity for the employers, right? So these are the positive channels. Now, as you have seen, so can you see my third part of the hypothesis development? Is it visible?
Not yet, sir.
Okay, now is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as you have seen that EPL can generate both negative and positive channels. So what does that mean? What does that, what do these arguments lead us to? It leads us to the conclusion that the net effect of employment protection laws on firm productivity depends on the relative strength of negative channels and the positive channels. So if the strength of the negative channels outweighs the strength of the positive channels, then the net effect will be negative, right? And vice versa, right? But here, in this context, in the context of the in developing country context, I attempt to add more insights to avoid this ambiguity in the theoretical literature, by arguing that EPL, the effect of EPL is context dependent, and it evolves. The relationship between the firm productivity and employment protection laws is not static, rather it is dynamic in nature, and it evolves over time as the phase of the country's development evolves as well. So I argue here that due to excess supply of labor, the cost of shirking is already high, in least developed countries or developing countries. Hence, an incentive to workers in the form of strict EPL would be less effective to bring down the shirking below the equilibrium level. And the effectiveness of the EPL to increase the effort level of the workers will not be so much. The effectiveness will be less, especially if the effort level of the workers are already at the lower level, right? So firms, this is one line of argument. The another line of argument is that firms they will greater control over price determination due to imperfections in the labor market. Firms can compromise with the quality of a product to decrease its price so as to increase the profitability, right? And on the other hand, as far as consumers are concerned, consumers tend to be more attracted to price reductions than product quality due to lower levels of income in these economies. When I say these economies, I mean developing economies or less developed countries, right? Further, while investing in firm-specific skills is a growing practice, in industrialized economies, it is uncommon, as I have seen in the previous, I discussed in the previous slide, that EPL can develop positive effect by inducing firm-specific skill development. Workers as well as employers can invest in company-specific skills when there is stability in the workforce because of the EPL. But at the same time, here I argue that this firm specific skill development is common practice in advanced economies, but unfortunately it has not been practiced much in underdeveloped countries or developing countries like India. If we look at the NSS data tells us that only 0.6% of the workers working in India, they receive on-the-job training from employers. So this shows that this skill specific training programs at the workplace are not so common in the context of developing economies like India, right? So therefore, we may argue that in the initial phase of the economy's development, right, when economies are not so advanced, it is possible that the negative channels of EPL may tend to be more severe as compared to the positive channels. So therefore, the net effect may be negative for firm productivity, especially in less developed countries, right? But as countries develop, right, and labor market imperfections diminish, the impact, the relationship, between EPL and total factor productivity or firm productivity can turn out to be positive, right? So this is the hypothesis. Now, to test this hypothesis, I develop a novel index. I develop a novel quantitative indicator of the employment protection legislation. So basically, the purpose of generating a novel index is to make an attempt to capture the enforcement of these laws. See, there are many studies in the existing literature that do analyze the impact of these regulations on industrial performance, but most of these studies, especially in the Indian context, they use a quantitative indicator of EPL, but those quantitative indicators are unable to capture the enforcement of the laws. They basically measure the strictness of labor law, which is on paper, which is on the document, but not their ground level implementation or ground level enforcement. So this my study aims to bridge this gap in the existing literature by attempting to measure the enforcement aspect of the EPL also, which is an important thing, especially in developing country context, right? So I measure this implementation or enforcement using the judgment on court, using court judgment data. So I use judgments of high courts at state level, particularly focusing on those labor disputes which cite, where judges cite those Chapter 5A and Chapter 5B of the Industrial Disputes Act. So all the provisions that I have mentioned above in Chapter 5A and Chapter 5B have been considered while studying the court judgments, and these court judgments were then classified into pro-worker judgment, pro-employer judgment, and neutral judgment, right? And after that, I have come up with an indicator. So this is the data. This is the basic statistics, which shows us how many number of judgments we did analyze. So we have studied 1130.
We have to move to the next slide.
Yeah. So this is the statistics which shows the number of. Now, can you see?
Yes, sir. It is.
Yeah. So 1134 judgments have been analyzed at the state level, and you can see Maharashtra tops this list with 153 judgments. So these judgments have been passed citing, these are the labor disputes that have cited the 8 sections that I have discussed under Chapter 5A and Chapter 5B. So only those labor disputes were considered for this analysis which cite one of those sections of the Industrial Disputes Act, right? So after classifying these judgments into 3 categories, I then develop a quantitative indicator which can be amenable to econometric analysis, right? So this is the quantitative indicator of the employment protection law. PCJ here refers to number of pro-worker court judgments. ACG refers to aggregate number of court judgments, and A is the rate at which the
we have to, sir, again change the slide.
Yeah. So A is the rate at which the relevance of past judgments decline over time. So here, when I say alpha is the attrition rate, because because here I argue that if a judgment if a court judgment was passed, for example, 10 years ago, it may still resonate. It may still resonate among lawyers, and it may still resonate in courts. It may still be cited, but legal literature tells us that over time the attraction of the older cases diminishes over time, although they can still be cited in legal proceedings, but the attraction of the older cases are it diminishes over time, and recent cases tend to be more attractive than the older cases. So therefore I define here, I use the attrition rate, the rate at which the relevance of the past judgments declines over time, right? And then I after calculating this index, EPL index, then my next job is to estimate the productivity at the plant level using ASI data, annual survey of industries. So I construct a panel data. This is one of the few microeconomic attempts at the plant level, which builds which constructs a panel data set, right? So I use the Cobb-Douglas production function here with 3 inputs, and Q
Sir,
here.
if you will be available to share the whole screen, so then any
Yeah.
movement you are going to do in your system, so we will be able.
So can you see it now?
Yes, yes. Sir.
Okay. So okay, from henceforth I will remember. I will refresh every slide. Whenever I will turn to the next slide, I will refresh it so that you can see it. So you can see this is the Cobb-Douglas production function I use. Q is the real value, net value added, and alpha is the technological parameter, and which is what we call as total factor productivity. K is the capital stock, and L is the number of workers, and T is the fuels consumed. So this is the energy consumption in a factory, right? The problem, with this Cobb-Douglas production function is it is not so straightforward, for estimation, because there is a simultaneity and selection bias problem in the estimation of Cobb-Douglas production function. The reason of this selection bias is the following: there is a possibility that there are unobservable productivity shocks. If there are unobservable productivity shocks, right? So their effect obviously will be captured under the error term of the model, right? But if the unobservable productivity shocks are correlated with input choices, when I say input choices, I mean this use of raw materials, use of this raw materials and investment. So if the unobservable error component is correlated with input choices, this will lead to selection bias problem, and it will create endogeneity in the model, right? So therefore we cannot use usual OLS method. So we need to remove this endogeneity, right? Only then we can estimate the model and yield credible findings. Okay, so therefore in order to solve this problem, we have a couple of methodologies at disposal in economics literature. One is developed by Ollie's and Pake's estimator, which Ollie's and Pake's estimator, argues that they basically use investment as a proxy to absorb these unobservable productivity shocks. But this method was criticized by Levi-Sohan and Patrin. Levi-Sohan and Patrin has criticized the Ollie's Pake's estimator on the ground that investment as a proxy may not quickly respond to unobservable productivity shocks, because there are transaction costs, and transaction costs may make it difficult for firms to respond to unobservable productivity shocks, using by increasing their investment levels, right? So therefore Levi-Sohan and Patrin, instead they argue they use raw materials as a proxy for absorbing these unobservable productivity shocks, and they believe that raw materials are more responsive to productivity shocks. So therefore, in my study, and it has another advantage, this Levinson and Patrin estimator has another advantage. We do not have to truncate our sample size, because raw material is is a data variable which is usually reported by all enterprises as compared to investment levels. Investment levels are not reported much you know, by companies. So that results in the loss of significant portion of our sample size. So therefore, we use Levinson and pattern estimator to absorb these unobservable productivity shocks, right? And so let me show you the next slide. So this is the procedure how Levinson and pattern estimator works. So due to the shortage of time, I may not be explain it all, but let me give you a brief overview. So this Levinson and pattern estimator, they assume that this, you know, raw materials is the function of that unobservable productivity shock and capital stock, right? And they also assume that this demand function, input demand function, can be monotonically increasing in nature. And if that's the case, we can invert this demand function, right? So we can then, you know, obtain the estimate of the unobservable productivity shock as a function of capital stock and raw material, right? And using further assumptions, we are able to estimate and absorb these unobservable productivity shocks in the equation, right? So now let me show you another equation. Now, okay, so after this is my final econometric model. So once I derive the capital A, which is the technological parameter, and which is what is called as total factor productivity, it accounts for that portion of the output which is not explained by changes in factor inputs such as capital and labor, or for that matter energy consumption also, right? So it is the residual. It is derived as a form of a residual. So this residual, which I call as total factor productivity, this I bring here as the dependent variable in my econometric model. So this is the econometric model. On the right side of the equation, I include employment protection legislation, the index that we have drawn above. And here I use then demi variables, medium enterprises. So it refers to a demi variable for all enterprises whose employment size is less than 100 but more than 50, and then large enterprises with enterprises employing more than 100 workers but less than 300, and then we have very large enterprises. These are enterprises which hire more than 300 workers, right? And then I introduce interaction effects also, where I interact EPL with firm size, EPL with medium enterprise, EPL with large enterprises, so on and so forth, right? And then I have a vector of control variables, which includes industry specific, firm specific, and state specific control variables. So I have 5 control variables in the model, and I include them to increase the confidence on my results. Again, there is a problem. As I said, identifying the impact of regulations is not so straightforward, because these regulations can be endogenous. As I said in the title itself, these regulations, they tend to be endogenous in nature. The enforcement of the regulations, is not something which is exogenously determined. So it is something which is influenced by the economic environment, right? So to eliminate endogeneity problem in the regulation, in the enforcement aspect of the labor law, I use lawyer density. So I calculate a new data set using artificial intelligence. So I have exploited artificial intelligence also in this study, and we have generated data on law schools and colleges and density of the lawyers across states in India over the period, spanning the period from 1999 to 2022. So I got the data. In fact, I generated it as a novel data on lawyer density. So I argue that lawyer density is a variable which can be used as an instrumental variable, for endogenous EPL. Lawyer density can help us determine the value of the EPL, and at the same time, lawyer density has no relation with the total factor productivity. There is no theoretical relationship between lawyer density and total factor productivity, but at the same time, increase in lawyer density can be positively associated with increase in the strictness of the labor law. Right, so there is a theoretical association between lawyer density and strictness of the labor law, right? Because more lawyers in a state, if there are more lawyers in a state, that gives more representation to workers, and they can take labor disputes to courts, and and win the cases, right? So in this way, they can influence the implementation or the enforcement of the labor laws if there are sufficient number of lawyers in a state, right? So using lawyer density as an instrumental variable, I predict in the first stage regression, I predict the values of the EPL, right? And then I use the predicted EPL in the total factor productivity estimation, and thereby I'm able to derive results which are free from endogeneity problem, right? So these are the Firdaus, how much time I have left?
We are having 20 minutes more.
Okay, so I have 20 more minutes. How much is for discussion out of those 20 minutes?
So we can keep 5 minutes of discussion, 15 minutes of sitting, 15 minutes of discussion.
Okay, so that means I can take 15 more minutes. Okay, yes. Fine. So now let's come to the results. This is the EPL indicator. This is the time series data that I have generated. I may not show you. I have some state level also. Yes. So this is the increasing trend. You can see the enforcement of the labor laws, particularly these job security laws, has increased over time. Although there may have been flexibility in terms of labor reforms, but whatever regulations we have left, right, the strictness, the enforcement of these regulations has been improving over time. So this is a good sign in Indian economy, because this augurs well for labor protection in future. Because if the enforcement of the labor laws improves, right, so it will give protection to workers against sudden dismissals or against any unfair exploitation, right? So there is a positive trend overall. And you can see trends in employment protection, this enforcement of this labor law, or we can say strictness of this EPL across states. And you can see it is significantly varying from one state to another state. There are certain states, where it is increasing drastically, such as West Bengal. Some states, where it is diminishing, such as Bihar, it is going down. And similarly in Andhra Pradesh, it is slightly going down as well. And similarly in Karnataka. So you can see industrialized states, especially in industrialized states, the trend of the strictness of EPL is going down over time, right? Except for few cases such as Gujarat, where it has Gujarat is an industrialized state, manufacturing, one of the manufacturing hubs, but here fortunately it has been improving over time slightly, right? So you can see these are the kernel density estimates and box plots, which can give us some idea about the distribution of EPL. And these are the results of my Cobb-Douglas production function. So these are the estimates of the Cobb-Douglas production function. These are the estimates of this is the
so
coefficient.
We need to,
Yeah. Okay. Is it fine now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the coefficients on coefficients of the Cobb-Douglas production function. Coefficient on workers, you can see significant. Coefficient on fuel is significant. Coefficient on capital significant. So if you take the summation of all these coefficients, so I think we get around 60% of the output is being explained by changes in number of workers, fuels consumed, and capital. So that means the remaining 40% of the output is not being explained by these inputs. They are rather so the 40% of the production can be attributed to total factor productivity. The efficiency, organizational efficiency, accounts for 40% of the organizational output, right? So you can see this is the trend in the total factor productivity estimates. So total factor productivity, by the way, I would like to tell you that total factor productivity is also used synonymously for firm efficiency. So when you talk about efficiency, we can use total factor productivity as a proxy for firm as a proxy for firm efficiency. So you can see over time there is an increase. There was an increase in the initial phase, then it went down. There are several reasons why this efficiency levels in these
this
firms.
front slide is not displayed.
Yeah. So is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you can see from 2008 onwards, there is a dip in efficiency levels. And this can be explained by several reasons. One is there was there was a global recession, financial crisis of 2008, and that had a negative effect on India's exports also. So India's exports got affected, and as a result, there was a decline in the demand for India's manufacturing output at the international level. So that contributes to this dip in the TFP partly. And then you can also see there were some policy policy induced shocks, such as GST implementation in this sample period, and also there was demonetization period also. So these several events have led to this dip in the total factor productivity levels in the formal manufacturing sector, right? So now,
Sir, sorry to interrupt
yeah.
you for a second. Actually,
Yes,
Dr.
yes.
Shashank wants to ask a question. So
Okay.
can we take questions in between the PPT? Is it okay for you?
Yeah, sure, it's fine.
Okay, great. Dr. Shashank, would you like to ask your question now? Dr. Shashank, are you there?
I think we should, move now, as lastly we are having 5 minutes.
Okay. So let's move forward. So these are you can see TFP across states. You can see Maharashtra, firms operating in Maharashtra, they are more efficient as compared to others, followed by Karnataka, Gujarat, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, and you can see states at the bottom level, including Assam, Bihar, and West Bengal. And so for obvious reasons, Bihar and Assam, they are the efficiency levels of enterprises working in these states is not so high. You can see the capital density estimates of the TFP, and you can see the total factory productivity by size of the firm and the EPL category. So I categorize EPL into two: pro worker and pro employer. Right. So if the EPL score is high, means strictness, enforcement of the labor law is high, then I call it as pro worker, and if it is low, then I call it as pro employer. So you can see here, and these are the box plots showing in different contexts. These are small enterprises with flexible EPL. These are small enterprises with strict EPL. These are medium enterprises with flexible EPL.
So we have to go to next slide, sir.
Yeah. So you can see I can you can visualize the impact of EPL on TFP using this graph, also using these box plots also, if you are if you are very good in reading these graphs. Can you is it visible? Are these box plots visible?
Yes,
they
sir.
are
These are,
visible.
Yeah.
and Dr. Shashank is also here, sir. Can we take his question?
Okay, yeah, I can take it. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Shashank, please ask your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Shashank Mehrotra from Accurate Institute of Management and Technology, Greater Noida. Ma'am, I am an assistant professor in Department of MBA. I completed my doctorate 3 years back and now actively working in the areas of research and management to teaching MBA students. My question was, what are the endogenous and exogenous variables which were earlier stated at the beginning of the presentation and the slides?
Yes. Okay. So I got your question. So basically, you are asking the difference between the endogenous and exogenous variables. So when we say exogenous variable is anything. See, here we are talking about economic variables, right? We are you can see in our model we have economic variables and we have some law related variable, right? And we are aware, we are well familiar about the fact that one economic variable influences another variable, right? For example, if we have more technology in the economy, we will have more output. And similarly, if we have more output, we will have more technology because it will be affordable for us to purchase more technology, right? Similarly, if we have more wages can give us more wages can enable workers to have more education. Similarly, more education can get more wages for, and so all these variables, they are influencing each other, right? So any variable who can be influenced with other economic variables are more technically speaking, if the value of the variable is determined within the system, within the economic system only, right, then we call it as an endogenous variable. But if there is anything or any variable which cannot be influenced within the system itself, which whose value can be determined, external, outside of this system, then such variables are called as they are called as exogenous variables. For example, rainfall, and how much rain falls. So rainfall amount, the amount of rainfall, this is an exogenous variable, because whether our GDP is high or low, it will not influence how much rainfall we will receive. So rainfall we will take as an exogenous variable, because how much rainfall we will get, it is not determined within the system. It is determined exogenously, outside our economic system, right? So this is the difference between exogenous and endogenous variable, right? Here, I show you these box plots to visualize the impact. And now I can go to the empirical results. You can see, if you can see here, EPL here I introduced as a demi variable. So demi variable.
Sir,
here
if you
in this-
can, zoom, if you can, increase the size. So I think that.
Okay, yeah. Let me increase the size. Oh, unfortunately, its size, I think this is the maximum size. Yeah, if I increase the size, it shifts to another slide. Okay, so bear with me. I will explain these verbally. You can see here EPL is a demi variable, right? It takes value 1. It takes value 1 if the score of the EPL is higher, sufficiently higher, so that it can be considered as pro worker. Means the range of the EPL in our case is 0 to 50, right? So if the value of the EPL is higher than 50%, so then I categorize it as pro worker, means strictness is sufficiently enough, right, for workers. So here EPL as a demi variable, it is a pro worker EPL, means it takes value 1 when the strictness of job security laws is sufficient, right? And it takes value 0 if it is laxer, or if it is not so strict. If it is flexible for employers, then it takes value 0. So you can see here, this pro worker EPL, it has minus sign, it has negative sign here, and I have several regulations without controls, with controls, with additional controls. You can see in all these regulations EPL has a negative coefficient. So this shows that when EPL, when the strictness or enforcement of these regulations increase, it has a negative effect on firm performance. So it maybe it creates rigidity for employment adjustments, labor adjustments, and maybe it creates misallocation of resources in the firm. So in another slide, you can see I estimate the differential effects. I want to see where does this impact come from which particular enterprises. You can see here I interact this EPL variable with size category of the enterprises. You can see I interact it with medium categories, large categories, very large categories, and you can see negative signs, coefficient signs on large enterprises and very large enterprises. So you can see in all these regressions, the differential effects of large enterprise and very large enterprise are negative. So that means the negative effect of EPL is particularly visible. It is particularly visible for those enterprises which are relatively larger in size. So that means we can say EPL affects larger sizes as compared to larger sizes relatively more as compared to the small enterprises. Now we can go to the next slide. So here I have discussed that I use instrumental variable technique. I use Layer density as an instrument to address endogeneity problem. So these are the results. This slide shows that the least square results. And again, you can see in these results EPL, which is demi variable here, but here in this case it is predicted EPL, right? So here again you can see negative coefficient being registered here in all these regulations. There's a negative coefficient of on EPL. So again, it increases the confidence on our results. These show that there is a negative effect of EPL on firm performance. These are additional robustness checks which satisfies, which are consistent. These are another further robustness checks. Yeah, and now this is the last slide. Here I measure the effect of incremental changes. As I said in the last in the last results, I have shown that EPL appeared in the equation as a as a demi variable. It took value 1 if the score of the EPL was very high, it was higher than 50. But here I use it as a continuous variable. So here by using it as a continuous variable, I measure the impact of small changes in EPL on TFP, right? But here in this in this result table, you can see very interestingly, you can see that EPL does not have a significant negative effect. Although the sign is still negative, but it's not significant enough, right, to be considered as statistically significant. So therefore, we can conclude that that small improvements or small increase in the enforcement of EPL does not affect total factor productivity in firms. But if the strictness of labor law, right, if it increases sufficiently or substantially enough to be considered as pro worker, then only or in other words, we can say if the enforcement level of labor regulations increases beyond a certain threshold, if it crosses certain threshold, then the effect of these regulations tend to be negative for firm performance, right? So you can visualize the impact here. So this is the conclusion.
So,
yeah.
Sir, so sorry to interrupt you again. Sir, since we are running out of time, so I would like to request you to conclude the session, as a second session will also start after that.
Yes, so I will take now only 1 minute. So
Okay,
these are the
sure.
policy implications of my study. So let me show you the slide again. So these are the policy implications. The recent labor law reforms bode well for the manufacturing sector. However, policymakers need to be careful with the balance of the power between labor and capital, as excessive flexibility in the labor market may backfire in the long run. Right, so policymakers must take TFP growth, total factor productivity growth, seriously and make substantial investments in skill formation and incentivize the research and innovation in industries. On-the-job training is also important for firms to sustain, competitiveness in the long run. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of everyone participating in this workshop, I extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Irfan Ahmad Sofi for sharing your valuable knowledge and insight with us today. So your expertise and thorough presentation have greatly enriched our understanding. So before ending, I would like to request anyone who wants to ask any questions from Dr. Irfan. Do we have any questions? Please raise your hands.
As of now, there is no question, so I think yes.
Okay, sir. Let's conclude it.
No, one hand
Yes,
is there.
Okay, one hand is there. Yes, Mr. Sheikh, sir, you can ask your question from Dr. Irfan.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
Sir, you have taken EPL as both discrete as well as continuous variable, I think.
Yes.
How is it possible? Can you discuss it a bit?
Okay, so when you say I have taken EPL as discrete as well as continuous variable, so I have not actually used EPL as a discrete variable. In fact, I have the EPL with me is originally a continuous variable. Then I convert it into a binary variable, not discrete variable. So when I say binary variable, I mean so I convert it into binary variable by the following procedure. So if EPL, if the value of the EPL is greater than 50, right? If the value of the EPL is greater than 50, then I consider take value 1. And if the value of the EPL score is less than 50, then I assign value 0, right? So in this way, I make it binary, right? Now the question is why I make it binary. See, if the value of the EPL is exactly 50, so at that point it suggests that the number of pro-worker judgments and pro-employer judgments are same, right? But if the value of the EPL crosses 50, so that means the number of pro-worker judgments are greater than the number of the pro-employer judgments, right? So in that context, I give value 1. So if the number of judgments are lower, pro-worker judgments are lower than pro-employer judgments, so that means EPL score is less than 50, then I give value 0. So is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's clear.
Okay.
Thank you